Thank you very much for the eloquent introduction, and what a pleasure and honor to provide the concluding keynote address for this great conference. And first of all, let me join the other speakers in paying tribute to the legacy of the late chairperson of the board of ICT, Mr. Shabtai Shavit, and offer condolences to his family and his community over here. And I express my sincere praise to ICT's remarkable team for convening such impressive speakers from all over the world. I'd like to commend Professor Reichman for guiding these efforts for so many years. And I also thank Professor Boaz Ganor for his continued efforts to strengthen ICT's outreach. I express sincere appreciation to Vice President for External Relations, Jonathan Davis, and his team for your ongoing engagement. Let me also applaud the appointment of Colonel Miri Eisen as Director of ICT. And during this conference, we have seen remarkable women contributors offering their insights and experiences. And we hope to see even more women panelists and participants in future editions of the ICT conference, acknowledging that women all over the world are still underrepresented in high-ranking positions in law enforcement and in particular in counterterrorism. And I sincerely wish Ms. Eisen great success in her new role. And it gives me, of course, great pleasure to mention that the cooperation between Counter-Terrorism Executive Directorate of the UN Security Council, or CTED, which I am honored to lead, and ICT goes back 16 years. ICT has been an active member of our global research network, which includes over 100 research centers dedicated to counterterrorism across the world. Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday, we marked the 22nd anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. At this conference, we honored the memory of the victims of the September 11 attacks and of all victims of terrorism worldwide. I also wish to pay tribute to the thousands of uniformed personnel and civilians who risked their lives to save those of others. There are many in this room, and I honor their courage. The aftermath of that attack gave rise to the inception of the current UN counterterrorism framework, and in the days after the attack, the United Nations Security Council unanimously adopted Resolution 1373, requiring states to bring terrorist actors and financiers to justice. It also provides the foundation for the work of the Security Council on counterterrorism and has been pivotal for global counterterrorism effort ever since. Resolution 1373 also established the Counterterrorism Committee, composed of all 15 members of the Council, to monitor, promote, and facilitate member states' implementation of these provisions and that of subsequent resolutions. And since then, over 20 Security Council resolutions have required states to address terrorism through reinforcing legal frameworks and international cooperation in areas such as countering the financing of terrorism, border security and law enforcement, arms trafficking, countering violent extremism and terrorist narratives, countering the use of information and communication technologies for terrorist purposes, prosecution of foreign terrorist fighters, just to mention a few. 20 years on, the committee remains central to the counter-terrorism work of the Security Council, and since 2005, it has been supported by CTED. At CTED, we conduct expert assessments of member states to support the implementation of the relevant Security Council resolutions, facilitate the provision of technical assistance by the United Nations entities and other partners, and bring to the attention of the committee emerging trends and developments in terrorism. And the work is strengthened through our active partnership with the member states themselves, international and regional organizations, the private sector, civil society, and the global research network. And in parallel to the work of the UN Security Council, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy first time back in 2006. And 3 months ago, all UN member states adopted already the 8th review of the strategy, demonstrating the enduring commitment of the members to fighting terrorism. Let me focus next on recent trends and developments in terrorism. In the last decade, we witnessed the rise of Daesh, the atrocious crimes it committed in Syria, Iraq, and across the world, and the subsequent loss of its territories. While the threat of Daesh, Al-Qaeda, and their affiliates has diminished, these groups have transformed. In my briefing to the Security Council on Daesh last month, I highlighted that affiliates of ISIL and Al-Qaeda are particularly active in armed conflict situations, where they exploit conflict-related fragilities. From Asia to Africa, through Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq, MENA region, and the Sahel, affiliates and splinter groups have become more decentralized and operate with local dynamics. And as such, they may be able to foment attacks outside of conflict zones again in the mid to long term. Daesh and Al-Qaeda continue to inspire lone actors and small cells that are challenging to detect, monitor, and counter. We also need to address the grave situation faced by women and children associated with foreign terrorist fighters in the camps in the northeast of the Syrian Arab Republic. Over 54,000 individuals remain in closed camps and detention facilities for their alleged links to Daesh, and they are exposed to radicalization. And in this regard, the United Nations Secretary General has encouraged the efforts of member states to repatriate their citizens. The terrorist threat has also diversified. Attacks on the basis of xenophobia, racism, and other forms of intolerance, or in the name of religion or belief, including anti-Semitism, is the fastest growing and sometimes the most prominent domestic security threat that some member states face. Further, as we witness the almost limitless potential of new technologies, we should remain attuned to the challenges they pose. Terrorist abuse of new technologies is increasing as they become cheaper and more readily available, such as unmanned aerial systems. Financial technology is yet another domain which risks being misused by malevolent actors. Terrorist use of the internet and social media has been proliferating. Online misinformation and hate speech are rampant. And artificial intelligence has the potential to accelerate these trends. In October 2022, during the committee's special meeting held in Delhi, the Council adopted a declaration on countering the use of new and emerging technologies for terrorist purposes. Presently, CTAT is supporting the development of a set of non-binding guiding principles for member states on countering the use of unmanned aerial systems, information communication technologies, and financial technology for terrorist purposes. And I do commend ICT for ensuring that these emerging trends were at the core of this year's Global Summit program. In closing, let us have a look ahead at the threats and our responses. As the global landscape continues to shift, transnational threats are converging. Terrorism is becoming more interlinked with challenges of our time, including climate, pandemics, and cybersecurity, creating overlapping complexities for member states. To address these profound changes, and in advance of the United Nations Summit of the Future, the Secretary General launched the new Agenda for Peace and called for the emergence of a new multilateralism, one which demands that we look beyond our narrow security interests and prioritize comprehensive approaches over securitized responses. And this means adopting a holistic approach to countering terrorism, starting with tackling the root causes of violence and embracing prevention efforts, but also striving for justice and accountability. For that, counterterrorism initiatives must be community-based and facilitate the meaningful participation of civil society. They should also be firmly anchored in the pursuit of political solutions to conflicts and sustainable development goals. And I would like to reiterate that counterterrorism measures must always be grounded in international law, be human rights compliant, victim-centered, as well as age and gender sensitive. And finally, on behalf of all of us, let me once again thank and commend our hosts for facilitating this very useful platform to learn from one another while forging and consolidating already existing partnerships. We do hope that this ICT conference will continue to expand and aspire to a world free of terrorism. I thank you.